illness. So it's a little tricky.
Yeah, well,
that is
that's a
so true, and
creative.
I think we have a situation in hospitals around the country right now that a lot of the patients were negative yesterday, and the next day they're positive. So that person could have been John or Harry. Oh, I know John, and John is great. John has no symptoms. Let's hang out with John. But John was speaking to Carol 2 days ago, and Carol was fine, and Carol got it from someone else. And I don't think everyone is looking at those types of scenarios that.
You know, listen, I
Go ahead,
can't
Liz.
think of a better way to celebrate a holiday where you usually have a lot of family over than virtually, because when someone starts ticking you off, you can just get out of the Zoom. Just click leave meeting. It's a good way to shut down some of those overpowering relatives. And the best thing is, you can join later. It's really good. I like it. So, Dion, what are you cooking for Dr. Carr's Drive-By Thanksgiving?
Not a thing.
He's in a whole other state. He's
Not
not
a thing.
that far.
My drive-by would be 126 miles, so
Yeah.
I do not think so.
Yeah, so
Oh.
he's not. I don't even think he'll come. But we have a large, and it's not even everyone participating. But we're just gonna cook like the basics: the potato salads, the stuffing, the turkey, the rice, the tossed salad.
Ted is about to make the drive from North Carolina. I see.
It's delicious, Ted. It's delicious. And we're just gonna
Those are
cook
two
and
times I look forward to is holidays, and that's Thanksgiving and Christmas for sure. And food is
Yeah.
a big part of it.
Yes.
I think what gets lost in all of this is that, I know if we're going through COVID, but, what about the mental issues with people and just that connectivity with human beings? And, and I always had this question about COVID. There's a couple. And there's a couple of stories that I've heard, even with COVID testing. So, if we test more, I guess we get more results, right?
Right.
But the story that I heard, a few weeks ago is that this comes from a nurse that worked in a COVID site. And, just as a joke, a couple of nurses just took brand new tests, didn't even swab, didn't do anything. Broke them open, stuck them in a seal, sent them off to the lab, and he came back positive. How does that happen? How do you get so many false positives, or maybe false negatives for that matter? How does that happen? In a society that we live in today, where we think that everything should be tried and true, So, and then how do we actually consider COVID deaths if someone's terminally ill and they die of cancer, but they just so happen to have COVID? So we call it a COVID death.
Well, is it a COVID death? Is it a cancer death? I don't know. Did the COVID death accelerate? Did the COVID accelerate the death?
yeah,
I don't know.
Sure, it does.
But I'm
absolutely.
sure it does. I'm sure it does.
They
Um,
would eventually have a cancer death, but we must know that pre-existing conditions are exacerbated by COVID. So it is a COVID death. That's just like if I have cancer and I get hit by a car. Is it the car or is it the cancer? It's the car, because that's what struck me at that time and caused me to expire. So we have to give the case to the cause of that death at that time.
Absolutely.
That's a good explanation. And good
And I
sound.
don't want to get hit by a car. I don't want to get die.
Especially the way Linda explained it.
So I I don't want any of them.
Yeah.
Not funny, not funny. But certainly more questions than there are answers, that's for sure. So something is burning my brain today. I put it out there in an email. So, droplet or airborne? Which one is it? Or is it both? And here's the thing that's really on my mind, which is, do we have to wait in environmental services when a COVID positive patient room leaves, right, for either they expired and the room has to be cleaned, or they're transferred, or they discharge? So are we waiting for the air to be scrubbed? So are we waiting for the ventilation and air exchanges? So we wait for tuberculosis, we wait for measles, we wait for airborne, other airborne pathogens. So on my mind is, are we waiting or are we not? Because the World Health Organization, the CDC, and epidemiologists don't seem to all agree. The science really isn't there. The research is there, but not as much of it. So what are we doing? Anyone want to weigh in?
Well, I'm instructing my staff to wait. So I don't know how. I am not myself checking the room to see if there are any droplets still lingering around. As they said, droplets versus, what was it? Aerosol. They stated that the aerosols stay in the air a longer time. Was this person on a vent?
So Deanne, you mentioned something. So you mentioned that where you're not testing the air and seeing what's there. Many people are not. So the question is, if we don't wait after a patient was airborne for COVID-19 or had an aerosolizing generating procedure, if we're not waiting, if we move in to clean that room, are we getting 3 log reduction of pathogen on all those vital high-touch surfaces in a patient room? So it's something that no one's really talked about, and that is nosocomial cases of nosocomial COVID-19 with patients. So Deanne, you're waiting. Your team is waiting.
Absolutely. We
And
haven't
thoughts?
changed our protocol.
I think
Okay.
that's the best bet. And the reason why I say it is because when you go into the room, right, you have all these particulates in the air, right? Even if it's there's been some studies about pathogens that could ride on a dust particle. So
Correct.
if I can see a dust particle with my naked eye and a pathogen is less than a micron, like around a 0.3, which I think viruses are around a 0.3 micron, and they will pass through different filters. So as you have all those different things in the air, and you have that Brownian motion going on where they bang into each other and just go all over the place, it can get a rider, and a rider can cause damage too. The requirements for a negative pressure room after an airborne patient was in a room, in order to cycle that air, it has to go through a minimum of 12 air exchanges.
Right.
It takes about an hour. So you have to wait. Unless you have this miraculous device that Medline sells, which is the S400, which you get 400 cubic square feet of scrubbed air in half an hour.
Well, we don't have that, so
Of course, that was just a little plug.
that's why we're waiting.
But there's different technology out there. There's, within that device, there's a HEPA filter, which HEPA is great. It just traps what's going through it, right? Then it goes through like a UV disinfectant chamber, and then there's active carbon. And if you understand active carbon, it sort of works more or less like a nanospike, where that pathogen gets trapped in there. It could get ruptured, but it lives in there and just doesn't come out. So there's different things that you can do as far as, most of your older facilities aren't set up to, exchange air to that magnitude. So I remember years ago, I worked in a hospital in Richmond, and we had one wing that had maybe 30, negative pressure rooms that were set up, and we called them TB rooms because back then it was like, TB was more prevalent than it is now. So doing that, if you have enough rooms, then yeah, you should be fine. I would assume that the newer facilities that are being built now, they have their air exchanges at a rate that suffices. Other than the OR, it has positive pressure. So, when you look at it, I would wait the hour, you know. But at the end of the day, I think viruses and different pathogens can ride on almost anything, any particulate in the air, especially if you can see it.
Wow. And I looked it up as we were talking, and a COVID-19 virus particle is 0.125 microns,
There you go.
but can attach to larger particles such as mucus or dust. So it can be carried the exact way that you're speaking about.
Yeah. So I think that example that they came out with earlier, and they said, 6 feet, but then it could go like, remember when they said it could go like 13 feet or whatever, and they showed the diagram of a person walking and it just kind of, floated through the air as it kind of went off the person in front of it. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's totally possible. So
Absolutely. I agree. Well, if you've ever seen someone sneeze, and I have in person, and you see their droplets just lingering in the air, and it travels more than 6 feet easily, and no one is adding the factor of the direction of wind and the air, what direction it is blowing. It can be hitting you right in the face. And that's why I see a lot of these super spreaders. It's not one person going to the next, is that particle just lingering in the air and just hitting different people.
Right.
I mean, think about the flu. I mean, I don't think we've eradicated the flu. I don't think we ever will eradicate the flu. What's sad is I think this is sort of kind of turning out to be the new norm as far as viruses that are out there. I don't think we'll totally eradicate it. I think we'll get better controls of it. For sure. We'll start looking at vaccines and different ways of dealing with it. But for something like that that's introduced to our world right now, I mean, really, I'm 95%. That means there's 5% of us that it won't affect. So, and how long does that, stay with you? So, like I said, I think, as far as an EVS perspective, we've always known that these things would happen. We just hope and pray that our bodies just start, taking an immune or lining up their immune system to work in conjunction with what's going on. But
and I know we all also hope that none of us or our children and their children live to see another pandemic like this. Really horrible.
Well, I think Ted made a good point with this COVID-19 and the flu. I personally don't think it's going away right now. I'm not sure. What about that 5% and the others that didn't take the vaccine that's going to walk around and carry?
There's going to be
it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, there's going to be a large chunk of the population that chooses to opt out.
Absolutely right.
We don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that. So,
from a public health perspective, that is usually a norm, and that goes back to history in relationship with the public health system and minorities. That it's not a trusting relationship, and it's things that we have. What's the word I'm looking for? Things that we have willfully neglected to fix within the time frame of these 50 or 100 years, where the healthcare system were using minorities and those that were in prison. Less fortunate, those who are in certain populations, they weren't fixing that relationship over the last 50 to 100 years. So those stories where many of those who experienced the Tuskegee Airmen, who were used with the syphilis virus and who